The rain had already been falling for hours by the time Emma stepped off the last bus of the night. It wasn't a gentle drizzle or a passing shower, it was the kind of heavy, relentless downpour that felt like the sky itself was splitting open. Water hammered the streets, gurgled through overflowing drains, and turned every puddle into a tiny churning sea. The old streetlights lining the road buzzed and flickered, their weak glow bending and blurring through the sheets of rain. Emma pulled her hood tighter over her head and started walking. Her boots splashed through ankle-deep water as she made her way down the empty street. This part of town was always quiet after dark, but tonight it felt too quiet. The rain swallowed every sound, no cars, no dogs barking, not even the hum of distant traffic. Only the endless drumming on rooftops and pavement. She tried to shake off the unease building in her chest. It was just another rainy night. She'd taken this walk dozens of times before. Still, something about the darkness felt heavier tonight, thicker, like the shadows were clinging to her as she moved. Halfway down the block, she noticed a shape up ahead. At first, she thought it was a tree or a lamppost, but as she got closer, the shape became clearer. A person, tall, thin, standing perfectly still beneath one of the flickering lights. They were facing her, or at least, she thought they were. Their face was obscured by the rain and distance, but their posture was unmistakable. They weren't walking. They weren't even moving. Just watching. Emma slowed her pace. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. Maybe it was just another pedestrian. Maybe they were waiting for someone. But why stand there in the pouring rain without even an umbrella? She crossed to the other side of the road, keeping her eyes on the figure. As she did, the streetlight above them flickered violently, once, twice, and went out. The road fell into complete darkness. When the light came back on a second later, the figure was gone. Emma froze. Her breath puffed white in the cold night air. She scanned the empty street, her eyes darting from one shadow to another. Nothing. No footsteps. No sign of movement. It was as if the figure had vanished into thin air. Get a grip, she muttered to herself and forced her feet to move. It's late. You're tired. You imagined it. By the time she reached her small rental house at the edge of the neighborhood, her nerves had mostly settled. She unlocked the door quickly, shut it behind her, and let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The familiar creaks of the old wooden floor and the soft hum of the refrigerator grounded her. Home. Safe. She changed into dry clothes, made herself a cup of tea, and curled up on the couch by the window. Rain cascaded down the glass in silver rivulets, distorting the view of the street outside. She liked nights like this, quiet, peaceful, the world hidden behind a curtain of water. But then lightning split the sky. For a fraction of a second, the world outside lit up like daylight, and she saw it. A tall, still figure standing at the edge of her front yard. Head tilted slightly, facing her window, Emma's cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. She stumbled backward from the window, heart hammering. When she dared to look again, the yard was empty. Nothing but rain and darkness. She tried to convince herself she was seeing things. That the storm was messing with her eyes. But the image of that tilted head wouldn't leave her mind. She checked every door and window twice, locking them all. Then she went to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife she owned. Ridiculous, maybe, but it made her feel a little safer. She turned on every light in the house and sat back on the couch, knife in hand, staring at the window. Minutes crawled by. Nothing. Just rain. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps on the back door. Emma froze. No one ever came to the back door. It led into a fenced yard with no gate. Whoever was out there had climbed in. The knocks came again, louder this time. She tiptoed into the kitchen, her hands trembling. The rain masked any other sounds, so she couldn't tell if someone was moving outside. She reached for the curtain covering the window by the door and slowly peeled it back. Nothing. No one. Just darkness. Lightning flashed, and for the briefest, most horrifying second, a pale face was pressed against the glass, eyes wide, mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile, staring right at her. She screamed and stumbled backward, dropping the knife. By the time she looked again, the face was gone. The police arrived 20 minutes later and searched the property. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. They told her it was probably kids playing a prank. But the next morning, when Emma stepped out into the backyard, the rain had stopped, and there, by the back door, were 2 muddy, bare footprints. They weren't facing away. They were facing inward, toward the house. Derek had always hated the night shift. The pay was good, sure, and the roads were blissfully empty on his way home, but there was something about the darkness at 2 a.m. that always set his nerves on edge. It wasn't just the quiet, it was the way the world seemed different at that hour, like it belonged to something else entirely. And on nights like this, with rain hammering down in unending sheets and fog swirling over the highway, it felt even more alien. His wipers struggled against the torrent, scraping back and forth across the windshield as he crawled along the narrow rural road. The headlights barely pierced the curtain of rain ahead. He had the radio on low just to break the silence, but even that was mostly static this far out in the countryside. Just 30 more minutes, he muttered to himself. Then he'd be home. Warm bed, dry clothes, hot coffee in the morning. But fate had other plans. Up ahead, illuminated for only a split second by the sweep of his headlights, stood a figure on the side of the road. Derek blinked and hit the brakes, tires skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. It was a woman. She was barefoot, wearing a thin white dress that clung to her body, soaked through by the rain. Her long, dark hair hung over her face in limp strands, and she was completely still, no shivering, no waving for help. Just standing there, head bowed, as if waiting. Derek's heart thudded. Instinct screamed at him to keep driving, but the part of him that wasn't ruled by fear whispered that she might be hurt. Lost, maybe even in shock, he sighed and pulled over a few feet ahead, turning on his hazard lights. He rolled down the passenger window slightly, water immediately splashing through the crack. "Hey," he shouted over the roar of the storm. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" No response. She didn't even flinch. Derek hesitated, then killed the engine and stepped out, gripping his umbrella tightly as the rain drenched him in seconds. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" The woman didn't move until he was less than 10 feet away. Then, slowly, too slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes met his. They were hollow and dark, but not just dark in color, empty, like two pits carved into her skull. And then she smiled. It wasn't the warm, grateful smile of someone being rescued. It was a smile that didn't belong on a human face, stretched too wide, too forced, too wrong. Before Derek could react, she turned and bolted. Into the forest. He stared after her, stunned. She moved fast, impossibly fast, vanishing between the trees in seconds. The rain swallowed the sound of her footsteps until there was nothing left but his pounding heartbeat. "Forget this," he muttered, retreating to the car. He slammed the door shut, water dripping from his hair and jacket, and started the engine. That's when the radio, which he'd turned off before stepping out, crackled to life. Static hissed through the speakers, sharp and jagged. Then, beneath it, a whisper, "Behind you." Derek froze. The voice was soft and distinctly female. His breath hitched as his eyes darted to the rearview mirror. The backseat was empty. He swallowed hard, forcing a shaky laugh. "I'm losing it," he muttered and shifted the car into drive. But his hands were trembling. He pressed the gas and drove faster than he should have, the rain-slicked road twisting and turning through the woods. He just needed to get home. That was all. Just home. But 10 minutes later, the headlights began to flicker. "No, no, no," he muttered, slapping the steering wheel. The lights blinked out completely. Then the engine coughed, sputtered, and died. The car rolled to a stop in the middle of the road. "Come on." Derek twisted the key. Nothing. The dashboard lights were dead. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The silence was deafening. The rain pounded the roof like 1,000 fists. And then, in the rearview mirror, he saw movement. Someone, was walking toward the car from down the road. It was the woman. She was moving slowly now, deliberately, her wet dress dragging behind her. And she wasn't empty-handed anymore. In one hand, she held something long and metallic, scraping it along the pavement as she walked. The sound sliced through the rain, shrill and unnatural. Panic clawed at Derek's chest. He locked the doors and ducked down in his seat, heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. The figure grew closer and closer, until she vanished from view, swallowed by the darkness just beyond the hood. Silence. Then, bang. The roof buckled with a sudden, violent impact. Derek screamed, ducking lower. Another bang. Then another. Louder. Closer. The car rocked with each blow. Something, or someone, was on top of it. "Help!" He shouted into the empty night, but there was no one to hear him. The roof dented inward with a final, ear-splitting crash, and then everything went still. When police discovered Derek's abandoned car the next morning, it was soaked inside and out. The windshield was shattered, from the inside. Deep claw-like gouges marred the interior roof, and the driver's seat was soaked not just with rainwater, but with something darker. There was no sign of Derek. Just a single muddy, barefoot print on the hood, pointing toward the driver's seat. Miles away from the town where Emma had screamed into the rain and Derek had vanished from his car, the storm raged on with unrelenting fury. The wind howled through the trees like a living thing, rattling shutters and bending branches as if trying to tear them from the earth. At the edge of a forgotten forest, in a crooked wooden cabin older than most of the town itself, Mrs. Eleanor Green sat alone by candlelight. The small living room was warm and dim, lit by the soft orange flicker of a single candle on the table. Eleanor's arthritic hands moved slowly, knitting needles clinking together as she worked on a scarf she'd been making for months. Outside, the rain pounded the tin roof so hard it sounded like footsteps running overhead. But she didn't flinch. She'd lived here for 40 years. She'd weathered worse storms. Still, nights like this always brought the memories back. 30 years ago, on a night almost exactly like this one, her husband Henry had vanished. He'd gone outside to investigate a strange noise, a low, humming sound that drifted from the woods beyond the cabin, and he never came back. Search parties combed the forest for weeks. All they found was his flashlight, half buried in the mud. Eleanor never left. She couldn't. Not until she knew what had happened to him. Local legends offered one explanation. They spoke of a presence in the forest, not a ghost exactly, but something older than the town, older than the trees themselves. They said it walked only when the rain fell hardest, calling to the lonely and the curious, drawing them into the dark where they vanished forever. Most dismissed it as folklore. Eleanor wasn't so sure. At exactly midnight, the wind stopped. The rain still fell, but the forest beyond her walls grew silent. No crickets, no frogs, no rustle of branches, just an eerie, unnatural stillness. Eleanor's needles froze mid-stitch. She held her breath, listening. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed from the front door. Her heart skipped. Visitors were rare out here. At this hour, in this weather, they were unheard of. She hesitated, staring at the door from her armchair. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling slightly. No answer. Just the rain. Probably a traveler, she whispered to herself. Someone lost in the storm. She stood, her joints protesting, and shuffled toward the door. The knocks came again, louder, closer. Her hand hovered over the handle. "Who is it?" She tried again. This time, a voice answered. "It's cold out here." The voice was deep, gravelly, and familiar. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Her hand shook as she slowly unlatched the lock and opened the door a few inches. And there he was, Henry, soaked to the bone, his tattered coat clinging to his frame, his hair longer and grayer than it had ever been. His skin was pale, almost waxy, and his eyes, though unmistakably his, seemed distant, unfocused. "Henry," she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "It can't be. It's cold out here," he repeated, tilting his head slightly. "Let me in." Her heart thundered. Logic screamed that it was impossible. He'd been gone for 30 years. But there he was, standing in front of her like a man who had simply walked out for a moment and returned. "Henry, where have you been?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Let me in," he said again. No emotion, no warmth, just the same words, repeated exactly. Something deep inside her screamed that this was wrong. Everything about him was wrong. The way he spoke, the emptiness in his eyes, the slight twitch in the corner of his mouth. That wasn't her husband, or at least, not anymore. Eleanor slammed the door shut and locked it. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. Outside, the footsteps moved away from the porch, then circled the cabin. Slowly, methodically, the windowpanes rattled as something brushed past them. The door handle jiggled once, twice. Then, silence. Eleanor backed away, clutching the edge of the table for support. She didn't dare move. She didn't dare breathe. Minutes dragged into an hour. Finally, convinced he was gone, she crept to the window and pulled back the curtain. The clearing outside was empty. Only the rain and the trees. But there, in the mud just beyond the porch, were footprints, deep, human footprints, leading away from the door and into the forest. Relief washed over her. Maybe it had been a hallucination. Maybe she was finally losing her mind. At dawn, a neighbor stopped by to check on her, as he often did after heavy storms. But when he knocked, there was no answer. He tried again. Nothing. Eventually, he pushed the door open. The cabin was empty. The half-finished scarf still sat on the chair. The candle had burned out on its own, and the front door hung open, swaying gently in the wind. Out in the clearing beyond the tree line, two sets of footprints, one large and decades old, the other small and fresh, led deeper and deeper into the forest, where the rain had already begun to erase them. They say if you stand in that clearing on a stormy night, you might catch a glimpse of them, two figures standing side by side among the trees, unmoving, watching. And if you're foolish enough to call out to them, they might even turn and look at you. But if they do, whatever you do, don't answer when they call your name.